folks, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'll demonstrate how the ARP table functions in a switch and explain the process it uses to populate the information. You'll learn how network switches gather and store MAC addresses to efficiently manage the networks they're in. So as you can see in this basic design, I have two switches and two computers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to configure switch 1, switch 2, PC1 and PC2 in a flat network and allow the communication between them. And as I connect devices, I'm going to check the ARP table on each one of the switches so you can see how it populates when a device is connected to it. And the switch learns about that device. So first up is to configure switches 1 and 2. So I'm going to change the host name on switch 1 and switch 2 to know which switch I'm working on. So on switch 1, it's going to be the bottom left. So I'm going to go into enable mode. And now I'm in executable mode. I'm going to go to config T. I'm going to change the host name to switch 1. Enter. And now I know I'm on switch 1. I'm going to do the same thing with switch 2. All right. First thing is done. The next thing, I'm going to check for the ARP table. I'm going to issue the show ARP command. And of course, there's nothing in neither one of the switches. The next step is to configure a VLAN at layer 2 and layer 3. Layer 2 will open a tunnel for the communication to be isolated to a specific network. The layer 3, it will be the IP address, which we will be assigning to each one of the devices. So let's go ahead and create the VLAN on switch 1. First thing I want to look is for any existing VLAN in the switch configuration. I did that by issuing the show VLAN brief command. And as you can see, this switch has a default configuration. I'm going to do the same thing on switch 2. I'm going to issue a command show VLAN brief. Same thing. All right, so we're good. I'm going to go ahead and create the VLAN we're going to use for this example. I need to get into config mode. And now I need to state my intention. In this case, I just type in VLAN because we want to create a layer 2 VLAN. So just VLAN, assign the number. I'm going to go with VLAN 7. Now there's one thing that I want you to keep in mind. So when you are creating a VLAN, make sure you have a space between the N and the 7. If you don't have that space, it will fail. In this case, I'm going to VLAN 7, no space, fails. VLAN 7, space between VLAN and the number. There we go, it works. So now I'm going to have to name this VLAN. Call this test VLAN 1. And that is it. Now I have created a layer 2 VLAN in the switch. If I issue the command show VLAN brief again, I can see where my layer 2 VLAN has been created and it's active in the local database of the switch. So I'm going to do the same thing on switch 2, show VLAN brief, and now it's showing in the list. The next thing is I'm going to take this layer 2 VLAN into a layer 3 by assigning an IP address. So I go back into config mode, and now I get into the interface VLAN 7, and this is going to come up because now I enable layer 3 on that VLAN. Now I need to assign the IP address, and I'm going to use 192.168.192.100 because it's switch 1. I just want to call it 100. Switch 2 is going to be 200 just to keep consistency on the configuration. And it's going to be a /24, which means that it's a 255.255.255.0 subnet mask. And that's it. Now I have configured VLAN 7 on layer 2 and layer 3. I'm going to go to switch 2 now, and I'm going to do the same thing. And that's it. VLAN 7 has been successfully created, a layer 2 and layer 3 on each one of the switches. Now, the next step is I need to connect the switches to start learning about the MAC address and IP address between the two devices. I'm going to look at the current configuration in the switch ports. So I do show interface status, and I can see that there's nothing connected to it. obviously, because there's no connections between the switches. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to configure port 4 to VLAN 7 on both of the switches, and I am going to make that the link between them. I'm going to go ahead and get into config mode, and I'm going to get into interface FA4/1. I'm going to assign this to VLAN 7, so I do switch port access VLAN 7. I'm going to add the description of the device that will connect to this port on the other end. So in this case, it's going to be switch 2. And if I do show interface status again, okay, I have the information of the end device, and I know I'm configured on VLAN 7. I'm going to do the same thing on switch 2. If I look at the show interface status again, okay. And okay, I got the information on port 4. Switch 1 will be connected on VLAN 7. So now I can go ahead and make the connection between the switches. So I look at the connections. I'm going to use fiber to connect these two switches. Port 4 and 5 in this switch are fiber. You can tell by the icon. So I'm going to connect port 4 on switch 1 to port 4 on switch 2 using fiber. And you can see the ports have come up, and the physical connection has been established, but the logical connection hasn't been established yet. We can tell that by the orange dots. So we need to wait for those to turn green. All right, so now the connection has been established between switch 1 and switch 2. If we go back and look at the ARP table, the record we should see now is going to be the record of each switch. Switch 1 will know only about itself, meaning its MAC address and its IP address. Same thing on switch 2. It will not know anything other than itself. The reason for that is because the link has been established, so there's an active port and gathers the information of that one port, which is its own port. Show ARP, and here you go. So it knows about the device with IP address 192.168.192.100, which is the IP address assigned to switch 1, and its port MAC address. So it knows about itself, has recognized itself as having a port active and provide the information. The same thing on switch 2. If I do show ARP, it will give me the information of itself too. All right, so how can we start populating the ARP table? Well, we need to establish communication. So the ports are up, but there's no communication going between them. So switch 1 hasn't learned about switch 2, and switch 2 has not learned about switch 1. To establish the first connection to populate the ARP table, we issue a ping command. So from switch 1, I'm going to ping switch 2. And you can see the communication is not immediate because right now switch 1 is sending a message to switch 2 and they are learning about each other. So as you can see, the communication started. Switch 1 sent a message to switch 2. Switch 2 understood that message and sent them an acknowledgement back. And now they know about each other. You can see the process when the communication was established. On the communication was 3 out of 5. So if I do it again, show ping, should be immediate. There you go. Now, if I do show ARP again on switch 1, now this table right here should have two entries, one for the switch itself and the second one for the remote device. So show ARP, enter, and there you go. Now switch 1 has learned that there's a device connected to it, and the device connected MAC address is 192.168.192.200 and the MAC address. If I do the same thing on switch 2, I'm going to get the two same results because now it has learned about switch 1. All right, so the next step is I'm going to connect PC1 and PC2, PC1 to switch 1, PC2 to switch 2, and create communication between these devices, and you can see how the switches start populating the ARP table. So I'm going to open PC1 and PC2. On PC1, the one on the left side, I'm going to go to desktop, IP configuration, and I am going to assign an IP address in the same broadcast domain as VLAN 7. So it's 192.168.192. I'm going to assign this number 10. The subnet mask is going to be 255.255.255.0, and the default gateway is going to be 192.168.192.1. And that's all I need for this computer. It has a unique IP address. I'm going to go to PC2, and I'm going to configure the IP address on the second computer. So 192.168.192.20. Subnet mask of 255.255.255.0, and gateway of 192.168.192.1. Okay, so now we have the two computers assigned to an IP address. All right, I'm going to go ahead and configure the switches. So I'm going to use port FA1/1 to connect PC1. I get into config mode. So config T interface FA1/1 switch port access VLAN 7 description PC1. Exit out, show interface status again, and there we go. Port 1 has been configured to work on VLAN 7 and is ready to connect PC1 to it. Same thing on switch 2. If I look at the interface status, there we go. The switch port has been configured to allow the connection from PC2. Alright, so the switches are ready. I'm going to do the show ARP again to have a fresh start from before the connection happens. So show ARP, I know about switch 1 and switch 2. Show ARP, and the same thing I know about switch 1 and switch 2. I'm going to go ahead and connect computer 1 to switch 1. So copper straight through, fast Ethernet, port 1/1. You can see the connection has come up. And now we do the same thing, computer 2, fast Ethernet 0, port 1/1, and you can see it has come up as well. Now let's just wait for the link to start. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and ping switch 1 from PC1 and wait for the communication to be established. The ARP message is sent, the switch responds, and now they know about each other. Same thing on PC2 to switch 2. ARP message is sent, switch receives it, and sends a message back. There we go. If we look at the ARP table on switch 1, again, it should show 3 MAC addresses and 3 IP addresses. And there you go. Now it knows about PC1 and it knows about switch 2. Same thing on switch 2. If I do the show ARP, it's going to show 3 entries, 1 for PC2 and 1 for switch 1. Alright, now I'm going to add another entry to each one of the switches. On switch 1, I'm going to add the entry for PC2. To do that, I'm going to ping from PC2 switch 1, and sends the ARP message to switch 2. Switch 2 knows about it, sends it to switch 1. Switch 1 receives it and sends a message back saying, yes, I'm here. And now switch 1 knows about PC2. If I do a show ARP again, it should give me 4 results. And that's it. It knows about PC1, PC2, and switch 2. And that's all the devices connected in this flat network. I'm going to do the same thing on PC1. I'm going to ping switch 2. And the same process from PC1 to switch 1, from switch 1 to switch 2. Switch 2 receives the ARP message and sends the acknowledgement back. If I look on switch 2, before we have 3, now we should have 4 entries. And there we go. Now switch 1 and switch 2 know about PC1 in PC2 and they know about each other as well. And this is the ARP process and how switches start to learn from the devices connected to them. It captures the MAC address and IP address connected to each port, and that's how it knows which port comes in and which port has to come out. And that is all for this video. Thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching. I'll see you the next time.